All right, let's dive in. Today, we're exploring the first 7 major villains of the Bible. But here's the thing. We're not just going to retell old stories you think you know. We're going to break these characters down as archetypes, the original blueprints for all the different faces of evil. It's going to be good.
So when we talk about evil in the Bible, what are we actually talking about? Because it's not always some snarling monster or a king in a black hat. As we're about to see, evil can be incredibly subtle. It can be a whispered deception, a quiet, simmering jealousy, or even just the moral compromise of a leader who should know better. This is our investigation into those faces.
And you got to start at the beginning, right? In the book of Genesis, we meet 2 figures who don't just do bad things. They actually establish the very templates, the playbooks, for sin and villainy that you see echoed all the way through the rest of the story. First up, the serpent in the garden. Now, this isn't about brute force. This is a masterclass in psychological manipulation, and it happens in 3 simple steps. First, he just plants a tiny seed of doubt, making Eve question what she heard. Then, step 2, he completely removes the fear of consequences. And finally, the masterstroke. He appeals directly to her pride, hinting that she could be like God. Doubt, denial, and pride, that becomes the go-to formula for temptation from here on out. Then we get our first human villain, Cain. After God rejects his offering, jealousy just festers inside him until it explodes into the murder of his own brother. But the real key is what happens next. When God confronts him, Cain fires back with this question, and that line, "Am I my brother's keeper?" That's more than just a lie. It's this hardened, defiant refusal to take any responsibility. It establishes the archetype of evil that starts with jealousy and ends in violent denial.
Okay, so we've seen how evil can start with just one person. But what happens when that person is in charge of, well, everything? Now we're looking at rulers who have absolute power, and we get to see how that authority can corrupt them into defying any power higher than their own.
And you can't talk about tyrants without talking about the Pharaoh of the Exodus. He's the textbook definition. As God sends plague after devastating plague, you'd think he'd get the message. But no, he just doubles down, digs his heels in, and makes life even worse for the Israelites. His pride, his sheer stubbornness, doesn't just lead to his own ruin. It brings a catastrophe down on his entire nation. But not every evil ruler is a tyrant, you know? King Ahab represents something just as dangerous, the compromised leader. He wasn't some monster of conviction like Pharaoh. No, his problem was moral weakness. He created a power vacuum that his wife, the infamous Jezebel, was more than happy to fill with corruption. He enabled idolatry, let her persecute the prophets, and even signed off on murdering a man just to get his vineyard. Ahab is this chilling reminder that a weak leader can be just as destructive as a strong tyrant. Let's pivot a bit because evil isn't always an external force sitting on a throne. Sometimes the greatest threat comes from within. It works through manipulation and betrayal, twisting things that should be good, like trust, for selfish gain.
And this brings us to a really fascinating character, Balaam. Here's a guy who was a genuine prophet. He could hear directly from God, but he was also for sale. When a king offers him a pile of money to curse Israel, he just can't say no. I mean, God literally uses a talking donkey to get his attention, and he still ends up giving the enemy advice on how to spiritually sabotage the Israelites. He is the perfect archetype of spiritual corruption. And who could forget this famous question? It comes from Delilah, of course, and it perfectly sums up her entire strategy. See, she's not an enemy on the battlefield. She's the enemy inside the home, the one who uses intimacy and affection as a weapon to take down Samson, the strongest man alive.
So what was her motivation? It was simple, and it was cold. A huge pile of silver from the Philistine rulers. Delilah is the archetype of the betrayer, the one who weaponizes trust for personal profit. And her story is this powerful lesson on how corruption from within can neutralize even the most incredible God-given strength. Okay, our last archetype for today is, well, it's not subtle at all. This is evil as pure, raw, brute force, the kind that doesn't need to be clever because it relies on overwhelming physical power and psychological warfare to just paralyze you with fear. And the embodiment of that is Goliath. The Bible wants to make his presence felt. We're talking about a guy who was around 9 feet tall. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a walking, talking instrument of intimidation, specifically designed to make an entire army lose hope before a single sword was swung. And this contrast is the entire point of the story. On one side, you have Goliath's overwhelming might, his armor, his spear, and his constant taunts. And on the other, you have David,
A shepherd kid with a sling, some rocks, and an unshakable trust in God. Goliath's shocking defeat sends a crystal-clear message. Arrogance built on human strength is absolutely no match for courage that's rooted in faith.
So, as you can see, we've met a whole cast of villains today. From the quiet whisper in the garden to the defiant roar on the battlefield, they all show us something different about the nature of evil.
So let's just run through them one last time. We have the deceiver, the serpent, the jealous murderer, Cain, the tyrant, Pharaoh, the compromised leader, Ahab, the corrupted prophet, Balaam, the betrayer, Delilah, and the intimidator, Goliath. Each one a unique flavor of villainy.
All these figures, they really set the stage. They establish the patterns. But it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? If these are the opening acts, what does the main event look like? What is the ultimate form of evil that the Bible warns us about?
Well, that is a question we are going to tackle in our very next explainer. We'll be looking at figures like Jezebel, Nebuchadnezzar, and yeah, even the Antichrist. So to make sure you don't miss that deep dive, you know what to do. Be sure to like this explainer and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the stories of some of history's most infamous villains. I mean, these are figures whose actions have echoed down through the centuries and pretty much defined what we even think of as evil. So what makes a villain truly unforgettable? Is it just raw power? Or maybe cunning manipulation? Or is it something, I don't know, way more sinister? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore today. We're going to look at the whole spectrum of villainy, from, the corrupt abuse of power, all the way to the ultimate personified cosmic rebellion. All right, first up, we've got the tyrants. These are the rulers who wielded absolute authority, not to build things up, but to tear them down. And we're going to start with a queen, whose evil wasn't really about swinging a sword herself, but about insidious influence and absolutely ruthless political control. So Jezebel was a princess totally devoted to Baal worship, and she used her power as queen to just systematically tear down Israel's faith. I mean, she didn't just disagree with God's prophets, she actively hunted them down. And get this, take the story of Naboth's vineyard. She literally sets up a sham trial, brings in false witnesses, all just to steal a piece of land for her husband who was sulking about it. Unbelievable. Next up, we have the mighty king of Babylon, a conqueror whose military power was, well, it was only matched by his absolutely staggering arrogance. That quote? That was Nebuchadnezzar's whole mindset. After conquering Jerusalem and destroying the temple, he demanded that everyone worship him. He even built a massive golden statue of himself. His pride just got so huge that the story goes it took 7 years of divinely inflicted madness, where he lived like an animal, for him to finally admit there was a power higher than his own. Okay, now for a villain whose bruised ego nearly led to the complete annihilation of an entire people. This is Haman, a super high-ranking official in the Persian Empire. The thing about Haman that is just so chilling is the sheer scale of his vengeance. Think about it. One guy, Mordecai the Jew, refuses to bow to him, and Haman's reaction? He doesn't just go after him. No, he manipulates the king and plots the genocide of every single Jewish man, woman, and child in the entire empire. It's an absolutely terrifying look at how a bruised ego can explode into something completely monstrous. Our last tyrant is a ruler so consumed by paranoia that he committed one of the most infamous atrocities in the entire biblical story. When Herod, who ruled Judea with a total iron fist, heard these whispers about a newborn king of the Jews, he didn't see some spiritual figure. Nope, he saw a direct threat to his throne, and his response was just pure paranoia, the infamous massacre of the innocents, an order to kill every male child under 2 in Bethlehem. It's a horrifying look at how political insecurity can become a truly monstrous force. And this is what's so interesting, right? You see these different flavors of tyranny. Herod, he was a butcher, just brute force, open violence. But Jezebel, she was a schemer, twisting religion and the justice system to get her way. So yeah, both were tyrants, for sure. But their methods really show you that evil can be a sledgehammer, but it can also be a scalpel. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've looked at active tyranny. Now, let's look at villains whose personal weakness ended up having absolutely catastrophic consequences. First up is the Roman governor of Judea, Pontius Pilate. He's a guy whose villainy doesn't really come from malice, but from a complete and total abdication of his moral responsibility.
Look, Pilate knew Jesus was innocent. He said it out loud multiple times. But when he was faced with a riot and a whole lot of political pressure, he just folded. He chose the path of least resistance. And that famous act of washing his hands, that is the ultimate symbol of trying to look clean while letting a profound injustice happen right in front of you. It's a powerful lesson, right? That being passive in the face of evil is basically being complicit.
And now we get to maybe the most infamous betrayer in all of human history, a man from inside Jesus' own inner circle.
30 pieces of silver. According to the story, that was the price for a man's life, the price for loyalty, the price for a legacy that would be forever defined by one single devastating act.
And that's what makes the story of Judas just so terrifying. See, he wasn't some stranger or an obvious enemy. He was a trusted friend. And he weaponized a gesture of love, a kiss, to point Jesus out to his captors. I mean, his story is the ultimate reminder that the deepest betrayals, the worst wounds, they don't come from our enemies. They come from the people we let closest to us.
So, we've seen evil show up through human tyranny and through betrayal. But the biblical story kind of suggests these are just symptoms. Now we get to the source, a personified cosmic force of evil. This figure shows up across the entire biblical narrative. I mean, from the garden in Genesis all the way to the final battle in Revelation. He's portrayed as the ultimate enemy of both God and humanity. Satan's power usually isn't about brute force. It's about deception. He's that voice planting seeds of doubt, the one tempting you with shortcuts that appeal to your pride and your fear. He's the force that works behind the scenes, behind individuals and whole systems, to just weave corruption into the world. The biblical story, especially in parts of the New Testament, builds to this figure. The Antichrist isn't just another bad king, no. He's presented as the final, ultimate embodiment of human rebellion, a charismatic leader who gets global power and then demands to be worshipped as God himself. And this is where it all comes together. The Antichrist is basically a synthesis of all the evil we've been talking about. You get the serpent's deception, you see Nebuchadnezzar's insane arrogance and his demand for worship, and you get Herod's ruthless, brutal cruelty. He's the culmination of everything. This quote really illustrates the whole idea perfectly. A king's pride, a disciple's greed, a tyrant's paranoia. The biblical narrative suggests that these aren't just isolated incidents. They're all manifestations of a single, larger spiritual conflict. So let's circle back to that first question. What makes a villain truly unforgettable? Is it just their power, their cunning? Or maybe it's that they serve as a terrifying reminder of the choices we all have to face. You know, these stories, they aren't just ancient history. They're like a mirror. So if you want to keep exploring these ideas and connecting the dots, you know what to do. Make sure to like and subscribe.